A member of Wes's team reached out to me, and I have to admit I wasn't super familiar with his work when I first got that contact. And they said, "Hey, I love your podcast. I think Wes would be a good guest for your show." And I said, "Well, I talk about the intersection of emotional health and emotional trauma and entrepreneurship and some of those unique challenges. Do you think that would be a good fit?" And he basically laughed and said, "Yeah, I think it's a perfect fit." And as I've had a chance to research Wes a little bit over these last couple of days, I've spent a lot of time listening to his podcast, and I have to agree. I think it's going to be a perfect fit. I'm definitely looking forward to this interview. So I have with me the co-founder of A Human Project, founder of Superhuman Life. You can find his work at superhuman.life website, and he does Human Project podcast and Superhuman podcast. So with me today is Wes Chapman.
Hey, Mike, I appreciate it. And yeah, I remember my assistant Max telling me that about that email. We kind of had a little chuckle. So
Yeah, and in reading your bio, it seems pretty obvious that there is a fit here. From listening to your podcast, you seem to talk to people a little bit more, just kind of like in general, with respect to relationship and life challenges. Where I do focus a little bit more on entrepreneurship, but that's where you are. So I think clearly you have a lot to speak to in that area, right?
well, a lot of people are, a lot of people jump into entrepreneurialism because they want freedom. They want the concept of not having a job that they have to go to from 8 to 5. They want to control their own destiny. They want, it really comes down to control. And what's interesting is that statistically proven, most successful entrepreneurs are full of non-control in their childhood, meaning that they had something that was affecting their well-being in their childhood. Could be an immigration status, it could be abuse, it could be divorced parents, it could be disabilities. I mean, there was something there. So and those are the successful like ones that we can go and research, whether you're talking about like even like a Gary Vaynerchuk. I mean, here his family is immigrants, came into the country. I mean, he's the most becoming one of the more popular nows. That's why I throw him in there. But you can look through all the history of entrepreneurs who were just seeking that control. So now, when we're living in this world of fatherlessness, we're living in this world of emotional trauma. We have all these things going on. More and more people want to become entrepreneurs. And what's funny is that again, it's the same thing. They're just trying to gain control. The problem is they're not identifying who they are before they go out there and take such a risky, difficult journey as entrepreneurialism is. So you're right on. I mean, it's right there.
Yeah, and
So
we really just jump right into the meat of it. And as soon as you started talking through that, I kind of had a realization that I focus on entrepreneurship because for good or bad, if you can show up to your job on time and do good enough to get your paycheck, nobody maybe cares if you're happy or sad or depressed or anxious along the way. But with entrepreneurship, you kind of have to have that. But the way you started out by talking about seeking freedom and control, it's so easy to see that relationship because that is kind of one of the core injuries of abuse or trauma or bullying or these things, is that's what we want. But then we're stuck in that cycle of chasing after something that we feel like we don't have and then holding it away from ourselves. So that's absolutely what we want to get into. I love it.
yeah. And you also have the community aspect. You brought up something that when you go to a job, let's just take a stereotypical like cubicle job, right? As you said, you go there, you're on time, you do your job, you hit the numbers. That's where people are giving you any kind of praise, if they even do it all. In entrepreneurialism, you have this community that's like, hey, it failed. Well, read this story or understand this principle, or oh, you had a success of a meeting. You're so amazing. That we get this a much stronger community. And it's interesting, we make fun of it all the time, right? That the nerds are the ones that are going to rule the world. They're the ones that are going to be successful. And in high school, we can look back in our own high school journeys and kind of be like, yeah, that kid that we picked on a lot and we did think, man, now look at his life. And it goes both ways. Sometimes they fail, but I'm just, speaking in generalism for entrepreneurs. Why is it that nerds and the ones that were picked on and bullied, I guess I should say, let me restate that. Why is it that a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you these crazy bullying stories or about being nerds in high school? So it's just the psychology. Everybody asks me all the time, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? And I said, well, it takes somebody who's been through some type of understanding of trauma, because I would I would say that being an entrepreneur is full of trauma moments where you think everything's going fantastic. And this can happen in one day. You know, we joke about the ups and downs, but people don't realize that can happen in one day. Like in one day, you can have this amazing experience, and then an hour later, you lose your biggest client. I mean, welcome to entrepreneurialism. So it takes somebody who's really hungry and also understands, surviving through that kind of thing to become successful, to really make it. And it's only getting worse because it's becoming so much more competitive.
I feel like you already, just in this first 5 minutes, kind of like shifted my entire view on this, in that for so long I've looked at these as a background of emotional trauma, or that immature. I feel like I in the past have wanted to describe it as kind of an immaturity, because I feel like we didn't learn something that we needed to learn. But I'm shifting a little bit more to think of it as more of an injury that we need to heal from, because we have the skills that we need. But as you talked through that being almost a prerequisite to entrepreneurship, that really shifted almost instantly my perspective, because I looked at it as a challenge to entrepreneurship, something that you needed to overcome or pick up or fix, not something that kind of set you up to be on this path.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know. You could look at it in both ways for sure. But there's the caveat to all of this is I'm talking about somebody who sticks it out and makes something of themselves, right? And in the entrepreneur world, unfortunately, that means creating some financial success around it. Now, that doesn't deem it successful. I know a lot of people who have gone into the entrepreneurial space. It hasn't worked out for them, but they were very successful in their own personal journey of discovering who they were, of giving themselves new skills and techniques, but they just wasn't for them financially. So I guess the only caveat to your point, to make that clear, is that we're talking about people. It gives them the ability to have the thick skin that you need, the perseverance that you need, the understanding and the purpose. Entrepreneurialism is not about money. So many people want to make it about money because that's all we can understand as Homo sapiens to some level. It's like, okay, money is what deems us successful. Money is what makes this worth it. It's not. Entrepreneurialism, true entrepreneurs, yes, money is important because we all need to pay the bills. It's not the driving force. It's not the driving force. And it could be something as simple as proving. And I always, you've probably heard some of my podcasts. I don't like this, but this is part of the thing, is maybe they're just proving somebody wrong, a parent, a mom, an old boss, a girlfriend, a friend, whatever. And that's driving them, high school bullying. There's a zillion different reasons. I like to shift that mindset and just prove yourself right. Don't worry about proving everybody wrong. But, again, it's part of life. So, but they're not focused on the dollar amount. They're focused on creating something bigger than them, creating something that bigger than anyone thought they could create, and creating something that they can control. One of my good friends, Aaron Young, always says, build a business that's bigger than you, meaning build a business that can run without you, that can do all these things. And it's interesting. I mean, he's a very successful business owner who goes out and teaches that. And it's interesting that he has to teach that because so many people, they don't understand the concept of that until they've matured and maybe lost a business, gone through some things. That's the whole purpose of building a successful business, is to build it bigger than you. But why is it that so many entrepreneurs are so self-centered on themselves and creating that success around themselves? And again, it goes all the way back to what your podcast is about, is this trauma, this unresolved issue that the entrepreneurial world fills with acceptance, acknowledgement, control, community, all these different things.
So what's that bridge? What is it that shifts somebody from, they go into business because they want the freedom and control, but they're seeking the results. They want to be fixed. They want to not struggle with this anymore. And then to get to that point where they're motivated by, what's the other side of that?
Well, they're motivated by the pure humanity of giving back and creating something positive for the world. I think there's only two ways that somebody's going to listen to this and decide if they, decide how they're going to do it. And number one is get a mentor who's been there, somebody who can really guide you. And mentors have become a buzzword in since 2013 and on. It's just been this buzzword in the entrepreneur world. But you look at anybody any successful entrepreneur, I don't care if you look at, Bill Gates, or if you look at, somebody from the Rockefellers, they all had some type of mentor along the way. Now, traditionally, in old world, mentors were fathers and mothers and families. As I said before, we're becoming a fatherless generation and a fatherless world. And so we don't have the basic mentorship. I mean, I do a lot of mentoring to youth and to adults, and it's surprising how similar a 14-year-old is and a 37-year-old is in this capacity of fatherlessness. I just was with somebody this last weekend. We did a little cruise thing, spoke on a cruise ship, then did one of these Spartan races. I don't know if you've ever done those, but highly recommend them. They're addictive, hard but addictive. But anyway, he and I were having this conversation on the beach, and he was telling me his story about not having a dad and not having, his dad took off when he was young and all these different things. And he's trying to start a business. And this exact topic that we're talking about was kind of interlaced in some of the things. And so I just tried to do a little bit of mentoring and a little bit of, coaching about it. So mentoring is the number one thing that you would need to seek if you want to avoid this pitfall of, not making a business bigger than you and all those kinds of things. And the second is that if you don't get a mentor and you're just cocky enough to feel like you can do it on your own, which I do applaud, honestly, I feel that there is an element of that we want. We want the guy, if you're a football fan, you want the quarterback that's cocky enough that thinks he can throw it down 60 yards. Whether it's the right thing to do or not, you want that mentality. You want the guy that wants the ball in his hands with 2 seconds to go, in the championship game down by one. Like, we want that. Those are MVPs. So I think in the entrepreneurial world, having somebody that says, I can do this on my own, I don't need anybody, that's a good thing. But be prepared statistically that in order to understand how to actually get there, you're probably going to have to make some pretty amazing failures in the world sense. Again, when you understand that it's not really a failure, mindset, all that stuff. But it's either going to take, you get mentorship that you listen to and you honestly take it in, and you get a good mentor who goes all around. Not a mentor who says, oh, this is how you build your funnel and this is how you do your email list and this and that. I mean, that's great. But in all honesty, that's not mentoring. That's coaching. That's training. A mentor is somebody who looks at you as a person and says, hey, here are some things that maybe you should work on. I had a good mentor once who told me to go on a date with my wife. And I was like, dude, I hired you to freaking coach me on business. And he's like, this is coaching you on business. So a mentor is somebody who really looks at all aspects of your life. And then if you don't want to go down that path, then be prepared to statistically, not saying that it happens to everybody, but statistically be prepared to learn your lessons the hard way.
And the value there is getting that outside perspective, somebody who can help you look
Right.
at things a different way, because the situation you're in because of your best efforts. You made the decisions that you thought were the best decisions along the way. And that gets you the results that you're getting now. If you want different results, you need to learn to look at the problem a different way, which requires a new perspective and a different way of looking at these things.
Exactly. And that's what's so fun about entrepreneurialism is it's never the same. You're never going to wake up in the same, well, I guess I could take that back. Sometimes people do wake up with the same things over and over again. And I would counsel you to look at your business and make sure, because especially in a solo entrepreneurialism or a small company, there's very few days that are ever the same. And if you're hustling, if you're really doing the true definition of hustle, which we're hearing again, it's another buzzword. It's been around since the cavemen tried to make fire, but now it's a buzzword in marketing. So if you're truly hustling, you're never going to have the same day twice. You're never going to be bored, which is another aspect, of the psychology of an entrepreneur. So
if we look at the people who you talked about having this conversation with people and mentorship, it kind of requires that you have something that you want to change. So if we've got people who are trying to start their businesses because they want the freedom, they want the control, but they don't have that healing that they're approaching, they're trying to like pull that in, get that from the outside. How do we start to get through to people or help them recognize that, what's created this dynamic that you're chasing after?
Well, and I think that goes down to what I talk about in Superhuman Life is your core. We all were put on this planet, in my belief, we were all put on this planet with some form of uniqueness, some form of identity, some form of talents and skills. And as we go through life, we start to see, I mean, I have 2 children. They're completely opposite. But when they were born, they immediately had certain tendencies. My son is a daredevil who will do anything. He does not use his brain to process things. He just does them, you know, and it's great. He is one of those cocky football player guy kind of personality things that we were talking about before. He's one of those people that just says, no, you can't tell me no, you can't tell me how to do it. I'm just going to go do it. My daughter, on the other hand, is this very methodical, you know, she researches everything. One summer she wanted a lizard. And I told her, well, you can't have a lizard until you know about how to take care of them and what to do. And that was at, I think, 7 o'clock in the morning during breakfast. By lunch, she had written a thesis and had researched everything there was to know about a lizard. So needless to say, I went and spent $400, you know, that night on a freaking lizard setup.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted, right? My son would have been like, oh, there's work? Nah, I'll just go catch a crocodile. That'll show Dad. So totally different personalities. So that means they have totally different cores, totally different identities, totally different personalities from the same person. I mean, I created both of them. So, but they're completely different. So every single person on this planet is unique. And I use that word over being individual, because I don't believe any of us are individual. I believe we're all unique, and we are part of a community, which we use our talents and our uniqueness for. So to your question, to really get to that understanding of those things, you have to really have that moment of clarity with yourself. And that is the hardest thing for anyone to do, because it requires the most difficult step in human behavior, and that's being honest. And I'm not talking about your Webster Dictionary, 5th grade elementary, whatever, honesty definition. I'm talking about truly understanding and being honest, which in my world means having a complete understanding of who you are, of your core identity. And so that means you have to have a conversation in the mirror that's going to be very, very, very difficult. It's that conversation that requires you to talk about your mommy issues, your daddy issues, your relationship issues, your weight issue in your own head. It requires you to go deep inside of yourself and cleanse and clear all of the stuff that is just giving you this fog. And I went through that. I mean, I personally have. So I'm not saying anything that I haven't. I mean, we haven't gotten at all into my story, but I was abandoned at 1 by my biological father. I was abandoned at 6.5 by my biological mother. I tried to commit suicide 12 times before I was 16. I was abused in every way you could possibly think of: sexual, physical, mental, even spiritual abuse, the whole 9 yards, until I was about 17, 18 years old. And so I went through all these different things, but I also started my first business when I was 8.5 years old, and I made $500 a day and really never looked back. I obviously had my failures, but I became the 16-year-old kid who was going home and thinking about committing suicide, but then I would go into a business meeting in $2,000 suits. I guess at that time they were like 800. But as I progressed through my career, I started wearing suits that cost more than cars. And when I kind of had this aha clarity moment about 5 years ago, I started realizing that I wasn't any different than, everything that we've been talking about. I had created this illusion. I was controlling myself. I was controlling my destiny, and I was making sure that everybody else saw me as I wanted to be seen, not as I was. And that's the terrifying thing. If everybody takes off and now it's only gotten worse because of filters. I mean, my stuff was in the 80s and early 90s. And so it was a different life. Now the average healthy person is becoming so bombarded with fictional reality because of social media and filters and all this. And as entrepreneurs, we're becoming in this fictional reality world because people are telling us about their successes on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever else. And it's like, for example, the pictures with celebrities, right? It's like, oh, I met Richard Branson. Here's my selfie with him. It's like, did you really meet Richard Branson, or was he walking through an airport and you thought this was a great opportunity to show everybody else what I want to be, not what I really am, which is struggling to barely pay my mortgage or struggling to even afford a taxi? And that honesty is where you create power. See, all these filters and all these things. So back to my thing, in my world, I was wearing these suits and I was covering everything up. So I actually went through a cleansing process where I burnt a $3,000 suit, which sounds crazy, but it wasn't. It was part of me saying, it's kind of like that moment in Iron Man when he's up at the podium and everybody's like, don't say anything, just finish the speech. And he does, what's never been done before in a Marvel comic, and he says, I am Iron Man. And he basically is out of his suit, he's out of his protection, and he's facing the world and saying, oh, the guy that is killing and stopping all the villains is this frail, broken man right here in front of you. When I put the suit on, I'm indestructible. When I take it off, this is who I am. But it was that realization that he's the same person. That was the same thing for me, as I said, look, this suit is my Iron Man. This is my protection. Nobody's going to get to know the broken boy, the child who had went through all of these things, because that would require people, that's risky. Are people going to want to work with a guy who's been molested and tried to commit suicide? Are they going to trust me in the business world? There's all these internal my things, right? My problems. But when I burnt that suit, it was like, oh, I'm freed. So the first thing that anybody who's going through entrepreneurialism, I don't care if you're doing really, really well right now. At this time when I burnt my suit, I was doing well. It wasn't about finances. Like I said in the very beginning, true entrepreneurialism is not about money. It was about just me realizing that I wasn't really in control. I wasn't really in clarity. I wasn't really standing in my own power. I was literally putting on a facade. So to create that success, that's the first thing we have to do, is become honest with ourselves and let the world see us as we are, and help them understand where we want to go. Don't try to create this fictional fairyland of, just like what we talked about, be real about things, because it's only going to help you the further along as you go. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And that fiction, that facade that you created, was not a conscious thing. It was
No.
self-protective. It was the image that you wanted the world to see, because if they believed it, then maybe you could believe it, right?
Exactly.
So what needed to happen to reveal that dynamic? How did you become aware that, like, I'm living these two lives, I'm not who I'm trying to convince people I am, or am I? And like, what started to resolve that?
There were two things. One, I went through a divorce, which always will shake your world. It wasn't like a crazy divorce, but it was pretty drama filled. But I went through that. But more importantly, I always talk about, I was literally on this dream vacation. I was sitting on the beach, white beachy sands, just spent a lot of money to go on a vacation, have the ability to stay in the nice hotels, all that kind of stuff. And I remember sitting on the beach looking out at the ocean, and it should have been that moment that, and my business was still running, so I'm out on the beach, my business is running, money's coming in, all this fun stuff. And I'm sitting on the beach, and I look out at the ocean, and I just said, in my head, I said, I'm bored out of my mind. And I started analyzing my own conversation there. This was about 6 years ago. And I started analyzing that conversation inside of my head, and I thought, it's not that I'm laying on a beach and sitting here looking at the ocean that's boring me. It's that there's something inside of me that is not being allowed to be exposed. There's something inside of me that's not getting out. There's something inside of me that's not being talked about. There's something inside of me that I'm not sharing. And that started a journey, going down this path. And 4 years later, I started a human project, which is all about helping youth. This year we started Superhuman Life, which is all about helping adults. And so now it's kind of funny, I guess. As far as an emotional person, I was a very Tin Man type person when I was in my early 20s, late 20s. And when I had this aha moment, I started realizing that, I am kind of a teddy bear. I like to be emotional. I like to talk to people on a psychological, emotional, deep level. But this protection, as you said, made me like, oh no, don't go there, because if you go there, then you have to tell your stuff. And so yeah, I think it was just that moment of me realizing that it wasn't about the money, it wasn't about the cars, it wasn't about the relationship, getting the wife and having the house on the hill. Those things are great, but that's not what's fueling my inner core. My inner core is fueled by something completely different. And for me, my inner core is fueled on helping other people achieve greatness, not just monetarily, but also just, I just had a coaching call last night with a woman who on the East Coast, who's kind of going through some things. Her mom had just had a stroke and she's going through a couple of different things. And I just showed her that just the simple thing of taking care of her mother who's had a stroke makes her a hero. Makes her this, the woman that I was coaching makes her a hero, makes her somebody that is worth being on this planet. She's an asset to society. And just having her shift from her mom being a pain to it being a joy and a privilege was incredibly powerful. And to see her go through that transformation fuels me. And same thing with youth, to take a youth who's, deciding to commit suicide and determining, how they're going to commit suicide, and then showing them that they're worth living, that there's so much more to life than the existence that they've had to this point, and having them, their eyes just open, literally, not just figuratively, but literally their eyes open, and they start seeing the world for what it is. I mean, those are things that fuel me and fuel my inner core as who I was as a person. And so now that I've gone back in connected with some of my, sort of connected with my parents as much as I could, I found that when I was an infant, and even talking to some of the hospitals now, when I was a young child, I was always the kid that was trying to help the other kids in the neighborhood. I was always the kid that was there when somebody fell off the swings, or when I was in the hospitals, I was always the kid that wanted to go and visit the cancer patients or go and visit the people who were sick. And I don't remember a lot of these things, obviously, but it goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning, is that we all have this core. We all have these gifts. We all have these unique things. And as parents, we look down on our children and we say, look how Susie does this. That's really interesting. Or look how Tommy does this. But then as Susie and Tommy go through life, all of a sudden they start losing that. And then they get into their teens and they get into their, tweens, and then, they're 30 and they're saying, I don't feel fulfilled. And it's because, go all the way back to when you came on this planet, are you doing what is inside of your core uniqueness? And so being an entrepreneur, the successful ones are playing in their core. They're playing in their core, that who they are as an individual, as a uniqueness, they're playing in that arena. And that's why they're so successful. And you take a guy like Bill Gates. I had the opportunity to do some things with Microsoft and ran into Bill Gates and saw some amazing things about that man that I don't think a lot of people have ever seen. But here's a guy who's almost a trillionaire, literally needed to stick around for maybe 2 more years and could have been a trillionaire, but he left because of his passion to educate. And a lot of people give Bill Gates a hard time because Microsoft is the evil company, but just the person, he wasn't being fulfilled inside of what he was doing, which was creating a $1 trillion company. And Johnny Ives, there was an article in the New Yorker about Johnny Ives and his relationship with Apple and where he is and where he's trying to become fulfilled. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get a real big shock that Johnny's leaving Apple. There are, even at the highest levels, when people aren't feeding that core, they're not happy. So, any entrepreneur that's listening to this, are you building a business around your core or around what you want everyone to think you are? And that's a big difference.
How do you find that people are able to recognize that? I think in your story, like that's something that you were always aware of. You knew that was kind of a big part of who you are. But I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who will say, like, they talk about their business in the business terms. Time, I have trouble managing my time and I can't charge what I'm worth and I'm not connecting with the market and I'm bad at sales and all that stuff. And so, and in further conversation, they'll acknowledge, well, my parents were divorced, or my dad drank, or maybe they hit me, but I don't know if it was abuse with a capital A. So I don't know if that's really affecting me today. How do you speak to that?
Well, first and foremost, just a little clarity. I had no idea that I was a caring person. I really did think that because of everything I went through, I was supposed to be this Tin Man, Iron Man. This is who I am, kind of a guy. And like I said, as I released that and then went back into my history, I found that, wait, no, that's who I was. So to your point, everything that you just outlined in your thought there was. People will come to me, same thing. Oh, I'm not good at sales, so I can't be an entrepreneur. Or I don't have a unique idea, or whatever it may be. And again, success cannot be determined by financial glory and financial wealth. Entrepreneurial success is not deemed that way. Great art is not deemed that way. Let's look at art, okay? What artist on the planet do we know that is incredibly, incredibly wealthy because they're an artist living on the planet? There are very, very few. And I'm talking, traditional oil painting, watercolor, canvas art, right? People who create pieces of art we hang up in galleries. There are very few. But why is it as soon as that person dies, all of a sudden their art is worth just, millions of dollars? Picasso's the richest artist on the planet, but yet he's not on the planet, right? So, but they loved doing what they did, and they just kept doing it, and they kept persevering. And as human beings now, we appreciate it because we can't get any more of it. But the analogy between art and entrepreneurialism is, think of yourself as an artist first and foremost. Do not think of yourself as a business person, right? Because business has this like definition of time and stringence and bank account and all this stuff, but you're really an artist. And yeah, people may not appreciate what you've created until you're gone. The difference is that you're in the business world, so there is some benefits monetarily that you'll get, and that's just part of it. But, let's talk about podcasting. Podcasting's been around since what, 2004, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 3, I don't know, somewhere in there. Who even heard of podcasting before Pat Flynn and John Lee Dumas? Like, really? And look at what John Lee Dumas has done in 2 years. He's not even, this will be his 2nd year anniversary, I think, right? This summer. So look at what he's done. Not just monetarily, take out the monetary side. Just look what he's done for the industry. Look what he's done because of being an artist, because he's created this. Pat Flynn, I consider Pat Flynn one of those guys that really started putting people looking at podcasting. Again, the art, the value, so this goes back to provide value, right? And people talk about that all the time. Well, art is value. So providing this and looking at it and just having that paradigm shift, just that perspective shift, that's like, wait, I need to be doing something that's coming from inside of my uniqueness, that's creating this art that nobody else can create. And that may be, I don't know. I mean, it could be 100 different things. It could be you making shoes. It could be you creating a business that gives back to the world and makes money. It could be you doing video. It could be you being some kind of a coach. I mean, there's so many different things that we can do in this world. The world is wide open. The world is our oyster, all these different things. But you cannot chase somebody else's artistic ability, right? You can't look at John Lee Dumas and say, oh my gosh, he's so amazing, I'm just going to go copy everything he does and then I'll be just like John. No, it doesn't work that way. No artist has ever copied Picasso, so you have, and been successful at it. You have to look at this and say, I am unique, and I need to understand what my unique gifts are so that I can go share those with the world, with the community, and elevate the community. And so if you're not good at sales and you're not good at this, look, the best salesmen in the world suck at sales. I mean, that's facts. The best salesmen in the world do not do everything that a salesman does. Look at Tommy Boy, okay? Like, Tommy Boy's father was a salesman who just laughed with you and talked with you and was personal with you, and, would then kind of throw in the, well, I can take my butcher's word for it, or I can go look up the cows, whatever. But those were Hollywood lines. But the core essence of why Tommy Boy was having such a hard time selling is because he wasn't being himself and just enjoying it. He tried to copy his dad, and it didn't work. As soon as he was himself, boom, story ends. Well, that's sales. People don't buy products. People invest in people. And so if you're showing your true self, your true artistry, who you are, and that energy is coming from you, sales is the least important thing. I mean, it's the last thing you have to worry about. Time is another thing. If you're doing something that you love and you're passionate about and you're creating this piece, time becomes irrelevant for you. I mean, 2 days ago, I didn't sleep for 48 hours. 27 hours. The day before that, I didn't sleep for 52 hours. And the week before that, I didn't sleep for 72 hours. And I was exhausted, of course, but I was on fire, or whatever you want to say. I mean, I just was creating so much content that the time wasn't relevant to me. I was creating. And look, I met with Gary Vaynerchuk in New York. I met with Joe DeSena in Florida. I mean, I was all over the place meeting with people doing amazing things for our organization. But at the same time, I was creating stuff. I was helping people. We were going through things. And, I was just inside of that art and creation. And so time didn't become it wasn't an issue. And if I didn't look at my calendar and say, oh my gosh, I have to get all of this stuff done or I'm not successful. I just looked at it and said, this is our goal of what we want to achieve, and however long it takes to achieve that goal will take, whether it's an hour or 3 days. And so all those questions become irrelevant when you are operating from that core identity and uniqueness. And how to get to that is that honest conversation with yourself.
So what's at the core of this? Because I don't hear you talk like it sounds very pragmatic on one hand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear you talking about the law of attraction or abundance or positivity or having a good mindset. And I don't even really think I hear you talking about serving others and fulfilling their needs to get what you want. Like why does this work? What's at the core of what you're talking about?
So all of that stuff is, I believe in almost everything that you just said. It's all important, but until you are at peace with yourself, none of it matters. It just doesn't. Those are all band-aids to create an illusion in your life. Like, let's take serving others. I'm huge into that. In our youth program, that's one of the first things that we have the youth do after they have this conversation with themselves, because it amplifies it. It makes it so that when you go serve somebody else, you are outside of yourself, you are giving back, and you are, doing all these different things. But again, if you just jump in, let's take somebody who's suicidal, because this will go right in with your show. Somebody who's suicidal. Someone who's suicidal, they'll go to traditional counseling, and they'll walk in, and the counselor will either get them to a psychiatrist who can give them a drug. Okay, let's take that out. Let's just talk about the mental side. You'll go in and they'll start talking about, well, what are you doing outside of yourself? What are you doing outside of you? How are you taking, and I changed my voice on purpose. And they start getting you outside of yourself. Why? Because the most difficult thing to coach, the most difficult thing to change, the most difficult thing to understand, the most difficult thing to realize is who you are. And most counselors don't want to go down that road. And it's a dangerous road, I will tell you that much. So I understand that. But it's also not a profitable road, okay? It's not profitable for the industry to get to the core of your issues and heal them. What is profitable for them is to use manifestos and concepts, because you have to keep coming back for those. You have to keep coming back for that. Well, what should I do next? What ideas do you have next? Well, have you served, the youth? Have you served, the elderly? Have you done well, I need to talk about positive mindset. Oh, well, here's this audio cassette tape that will teach you all about, positive mindset. And here's this book. And I'm not dogging it. It's just understanding it. It's not a long-term solution until, again, caveat, you understand who you are. And that is it. So I have something, in that regard of what you're saying. The process is that we start with honest. We start with this honest and talking to yourself and realizing who you are and getting through some things and being honest with things that you went through. I was abused. I was molested. I was abandoned. Whatever it was. And then we go into something called healing. And this is where, to your point, I have a lot of people who will take my story and compare it with their story and then say, oh, well, it wasn't as bad. Like, my dad only hit me, for a couple of years, or my parents were just, my dad was just an alcoholic, or, my dad left, but he came every couple of months and, visit. They'll compare. The brain does not compare. The brain sees trauma as trauma. It does not matter. The physical part of your body will register trauma in different levels, but the psychological part of your brain does not measure trauma in any difference. And thankfully, I've been saying this for about 6-7 years now, maybe even longer. And finally, Harvard came out with a study that showed that those individuals that were sexually assaulted, molested, abused for years, they had tremendous amounts of trauma in the brain, obviously. Well, individuals who were neglected, so that could be dad wasn't there, mom wasn't there, mom and dad were there, but they worked 70 hours a week each to keep a lifestyle around you, whatever. Neglect is a fairly generic word. But individuals that were neglected in their childhood had the same level of trauma as individuals who were sexually assaulted and abused. Now, that doesn't take anything away from individuals that were sexually abused and in comparing or anything. It's the brain. So in the healing module of what we do, I explain it. I call it the Elmo effect, and we don't have time to get into it, but you can go watch the video and understand what the Elmo effect is. So it doesn't matter. You have to heal those moments. Then once you heal those moments, now you go to the last stage, which I call hope, which isn't hope of, oh, I'm in a burning building, somebody's going to come save me, I hope. Hope is the understanding and the acknowledgement that you are choosing clarity, you're choosing power, you're choosing all these different things over insanity. You're choosing the fact that you understand that you can get there because somebody else has already, you've seen somebody do it, or you know and you understand your core, your identity, your uniqueness, all these things. You understand those things, so you have faith that you can go and do that. And I use a lot of different analogies about rivers and lakes and all that kind of stuff. But the core of what I teach is become honest with yourself in all aspects of your life. I spent a lot of my young adult life convincing myself that I was something that I wasn't. And getting honest in those moments and saying, no, you're not this person was difficult, and it was painful. And there was a lot of things that I opened up, and that's why the next step is healing. And then I felt healed, and I felt like I had some control. And honesty gives you clarity, healing gives you control, hope gives you power. And so I had a lot of clarity and I had a lot of control, but I needed to go out there and create something with it. So, to your point, and in that moment, that's where we can start talking about positive reinforcement, thinking, all that. But the reality is, and a lot of people don't like me for this, but it's the truth. I mean, and I've seen it thousands of times. I've been doing this for years, and we launched, there's my calendar, February 5th, we launched Superhuman Life. And since February 5th to today, I believe we've had 2,500 people go through it, completely organic. We have an 86.2% open rate on our email list. We have had 0 unsubscribes from our list that haven't been because, we do have unsubscribes, but they've put in fake emails or whatever. But we have had a tremendous success. Some of our emails have a 100% open rate. This works, and it works so well that people go through it and then we don't hear from them because they actually get that. And that's not a revenue model. Honestly, it's a horrible revenue model, but it's a human model. And so, I spent 19 years of my life in psychiatric and counseling, and, I studied the brain for 17 years. I went through all kinds of things. And it was when I had this beach moment, my aha moment, and I looked at my life and I saw what changed me and what made me be able to be an asset to society and be an entrepreneur and all these things, rather than being, a criminal in prison, which is where I was headed. I saw that it was because of these steps. And, honestly, I didn't have it all organized and pretty and marketed. It was just, I did it kind of happenstance. And then when I stepped back and started having people ask me, how did you recover? How did you come from the childhood you did to the entrepreneurial success you've had? Forget the entrepreneurial success. How are you just walking on the planet Earth? And I stopped back and I said, oh, well, it was this formula. And now we've implemented this formula with thousands of people, and oh, look, it works. So anyway, my point is that I love positive thinking. I love abundance. I love, manifesting what you want. All those things are great, but until you heal, all you're doing is putting Band-Aids over everything.
Yeah. And that process that you just talked through, that's the process that you're basically giving people at superhuman.life.
It's completely
correct?
free. It's completely free.
So if somebody goes to superhuman.life and signs up for your mailing list, this is the process that they're tapping into.
Yeah, and it's a video series or an audio series. If you can't do video, it's got a button for listening to it via audio. I will tell anyone, caveat, if you've gone through something in your life, there will be some difficult moments for you. We see that the average user goes through the healing module. So we have the honest, healing, hope, goes through the healing module. I believe it's 1.7 times. So basically, some people are going through it 3 or 4 times. Some people are going through it twice. Some are going through it 1, but the average is 1.7 times. I don't sugarcoat it. I'm pretty blunt, because my goal is to get you out of the funk, get you moving forward, getting you into that position of power where you control and you have clarity of your life. And that creates ultimate success in entrepreneurialism. I mean, it really does. I mean, a lot of the entrepreneurs that we look up to in the world kind of had some luck. Mark Zuckerberg, a little bit of timing, a little bit of luck, a little bit of this. But once he started becoming successful, there were some things that he kind of worked through in his own existence, in his own life. I mean, the movie about Mark is it's pretty raw. Like, I mean, guy was kind of a douche, right? Like, not the guy you'd want to go have coffee with, except everyone wants to because of his success. But on a personal level, he's changing his life a little bit, and you can see that transformation. Bill Gates, same thing. Steve Jobs. I mean, Steve was the ultimate, ruthlessness, the ultimate person of doing whatever it took to create success. And unfortunately, his life was lost because of it. And now we're starting to get glimpses inside of his insecurities and his pain that he was living in. So there's all kinds of things that we can look at, and we can say, is it all about the money? Do I want to have a $7 billion company, but I'm in the ground? I mean, think about it. I mean, and those are real things. Those are role models that we can look at and say, ooh, or do they want to have, success in different aspects of people that we can look at, who seem to be enjoying their lives, like a Richard Branson or a Mark Cuban or something like that. And I'm not saying that those guys are perfect or whatever. I'm just saying it's different. I mean, I can tell you, Joe, the founder of Spartan, he's gone through these processes of creating some identity of who he is and realizing who he is. And he's created a brand all around who he is. And if you haven't experienced a Spartan race, then you don't understand what I'm saying. But he's created a brand around the core identity of Joe. And it's, I'll tell you this, and I love you, Joe, and I don't mean this rudely, but on a paper scale, on putting it on paper, Joe is not a typical entrepreneur that would have success. Okay. He's very successful. He's very smart, but he runs his life off of his core, which is sporadic, which is fun, which is engaging, which is he doesn't like to talk about himself. He doesn't like to do these things. And I know him personally, and maybe this isn't appropriate, I don't know, but I love the guy. He's one of my favorite human beings on the planet because he operates out of a space that very few people, and I've had the ability to be around a lot of different successful entrepreneurs. He operates out of a space where it makes sense that Spartan has gone from, a couple of races a year to now 50 races a year, and is this huge company that has millions of people that are going through their races. And, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense on paper when you watch Joe, run the business side of things.
Really,
So
it goes to your point that you'll be successful when you're honest and true to yourself and who you are.
And a lot of people want to say that that's because you found your passion, you found your purpose, and all that garbage. Yeah, but passion has always been there, and it will always be there. Purpose is always, but you're not finding, passion's not finding you all these different things. You just need to have some clarity so you can see it. It's there. Every single person on the planet right now is walking around with enough passion to change the world, to have enough energy to do whatever they want. Everyone's walking around with enough purpose to give us as a humanity, as a community, everything that we need. It's all inside of every single person. It's not some journey that you have to go out there and find it. It's right in front of you, or it's right inside of you. And so if you're looking in a mirror, it's right in front of you. The problem is that people don't allow the honesty to come in so they can see that. Yeah. And there's a lot of different factors. It's not, it could be like, like we say, all these traumas that are pushing you and have molded you into this person. Take me, for example, molded me into this like Tin Man character. That was because of some of the things that I had gone through. I mean, I had, 6 dads, I think, something like that. And those were like people that legitimately came into my house and said, hey, I'm going to be your dad. None of them were, right? So I had a lot of abandonment issues, not to mention real dad left me, real mom left me. But I created these protection because of that abandonment. It had nothing to do with me, zero to do with me. Those were environmental things that happened. And as soon as I got honest with that and said, wait, I'm not the kind of guy that likes to be, like this. I'm the kind of guy that likes to be like this, So as soon as I had that moment, wow, did things change. That's just one tiny little example. Yeah. So anyway.
So I know we got started a little late. Do you have 10 minutes or are you tight on time? You good?
I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. So in retrospect, we can see that relationship between abandonment and self-protection and becoming that Tin Man. And you said a few minutes ago, one of the hardest things is to really know yourself. And I think the trick there is that we think we know ourselves really well, which makes it even harder. So yeah. How do you get people started having that conversation, that honest conversation with themselves where they can really start to be open even to the idea that there is something about themselves that they don't know, and what might that be and how it's affecting them.
Yeah, and most of the time people come to that in the sense of trauma. Again, they have this trauma where they've lost their business, they've lost their job, they got the pink slip, their entrepreneurial career didn't work. I mean, usually it takes like another trauma to instigate that conversation. And I would counsel as many people that are listening to this, don't let that happen, because there's no need, to go through this life and just wait for the next obstacle to then create some kind of, plan to get around it. Really look at yourself now and have those moments with yourself. This isn't anything that I can do or you can do, or this. The only thing that can be done is between the person and the person. So there's some guidance. What I always say is that start writing. There's a big connection between the brain and writing that happens, and we've lost that in society because we're all doing this. We're all typing, we're all texting, which is great, but we've lost the cognitive connection between our mind and our subconscious and parts of our brain that store the stories. We're losing that because there is, we were designed to do this. We were designed to work with these hands in a very creative, creational way. And as soon as you get away from that, we start to lose the connection between here and here, which starts to lose the connection between here and here, the subconscious and the conscious. So build something, do something. Those are some techniques to kind of get yourself out there. That's why like going on nature walks is so effective, is because you're actually disconnecting from these relatives. But the simplest thing that you can do is take a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. I prefer a pen because you don't have the eraser, and start writing your story, who you are, where you've come from, from the first memory you have until the last memory you have. Just start writing. We've gotten away from journals. Journals were a critical part. These weren't things that people just said to be fun. It was things that were part of human nature. I mean, the Bible, whether we want to believe it or not, it looks like it'd been written since the creation of mankind. So at least a long time ago, they started writing things down and started telling stories. We think Facebook is our journal. We think Facebook is a place that we're writing. It's just not. Think of how the first human beings wrote. It was, a big metal stick thing or whatever, and a rock and a hammer chiseling on another rock. It was rock to rock to rock, creating this story, which is creating and keeping the subconscious mind connected with the conscious mind. So in an honesty module, if you're having a hard time being honest with yourself, start writing your story, handwriting your story. And a fun little trick, if you're able to do it, if you're talking about your childhood and you've gone through some trauma, go to your hand that you're not, if you're right-handed, go to your left hand. If you're left-handed, go to your right hand and write your childhood story down. It sounds crazy, but it will create, and there's books on this and everything, but it will create a connection with your inner child. So really the honesty portion is going in and looking at your life and looking at the reality of your existence, and then you're going to recreate some of those memories. So, I guess the simple way to show this is the Elmo effect. Very basically, is the Elmo effect has to do with the concept of trauma is trauma, right? What we talked about. So let's pretend you're 7 years old and you're having a birthday party. Usually that's what most people can remember is their first birthday party is 7. So that's why I pick it. So you're 7 years old, you have this birthday party, and all you want is an Elmo doll. You tell your grandparents, you tell your friends, you tell your mom, you tell your cousins, you tell everybody, all I want is an Elmo doll. And then your birthday rolls around and you get a mountain bike and some type of Xbox deal and $300 in cash, and all your friends show up. Everybody's there. You're at magical Disneyland. I don't care, whatever. You didn't get the Elmo doll. And for some reason in your life, now you feel like people don't listen to you, people don't care about you, people don't show you affection the way you want, people don't know your love language, all these different things, right? But now you're 25 years old and you keep having failed relationships, you keep having failures at jobs, and you keep using the same lines over and over again. People just don't understand me, people don't listen to me, people don't give me what I need, people don't appreciate my feelings. Well, what happens is they'll come, to a guy like me, and we go all the way back to the Elmo doll. And we find out that, hey, wait a minute, you created a marker, a trigger in your brain that made you feel as if people don't care about you. But let's get honest for a moment. Let's re-architect this a little bit. You got a mountain bike, you got some form of an Xbox, you got $300 in cash, all your friends showed up, and you were at Disneyland. Don't you see that you actually did get something pretty remarkable? The problem is that other human beings, yeah, they maybe weren't listening to you, but it didn't mean they don't love you. And that simple paradigm shift, that simple perspective, now you go all the way through the rest of your life and you start being like, oh, I see why this happened. I see why Tom didn't marry me. I see why this didn't happen. I see why this didn't happen. I see why, I got fired from this job. All of a sudden you start getting clarity because you've been honest in that moment. Then you start healing. And now you're standing in this moment where you say, I get it. The light bulb's on. I understand it. I need to shift maybe a couple things inside of me and a couple of ways in which I communicate. But if somebody doesn't, quote unquote, hear me, it doesn't mean they don't love me. And that's a very, very simple analogy. But those are the handicaps. Those are the blockades. Those are the roadblocks, whatever, that stop people from having success. And so going back and just creating that honesty, creating that moment where you say, wait, actually, it was pretty good. And this is what's crazy, Mike, is that I had the exact same experience with being one of the abuse things that they would do when I was living in my home was we'd do something wrong, and you've all heard the phrase "in the doghouse," right? Mostly married guys have heard, I'm in the doghouse. Well, for me, being in the doghouse was literally being in a doghouse. I'd have a chain around my neck, and I would sleep in a doghouse, and they would bring food out, and they thought it was funny. They being my stepfather. And his brothers and things like that. So whenever I heard the phrase doghouse, it was just a very negative thing for me. And I had to go back into the same process. Everything I'm talking about, I've done myself. I went back in the same process and realized how amazing, it's going to sound crazy, how amazing being in that doghouse was because of the benefits that it gave me, the identity that it gave me, the clarity, the power, all these things. But more importantly, I had an honesty session with myself where I said, I chose this. There's a reason that I went through this and Mike, you didn't, right? There's a reason that I went through this. It's because inside of me, the core of me, I can handle this. I can do this. I have the power to overcome this obstacle. It's not going to control me. It's not going to dictate my life. It's not going to turn me into something that everybody says I'm supposed to be. It's going to mold me into something that I know I can be because I can handle it. So, you look at all these crazy stories. I mean, we're born here in the United States. The odds of us being born in the United States, like percentagely, mathematically, is incredibly low. Incredibly low. Like, I don't even know the percentage, but out of 7 billion, what is the population of the United States? Like 300 million, 600 million, whatever. I mean, for us to be born in the United States is an incredibly low percentage. So all these people that have all these crazy stories of immigration and living in these huts and doing all these things, they are able to endure that and come out of that and be something. Now, unfortunately, they're not being told that message, which I would love to do. But us as individuals, everything we've been through in life is because we have the power to overcome those things. And that's where you get immense power. So here I am having this honesty moment about my childhood, my life, my stuff. I'm going through the healing. And now I get to the power. And it's like, dude, I could sleep in a doghouse with a chain around my neck, eat out of a dog dish, and still have a conversation with a regular normal human being and still be an asset to society. I don't know if I can swear on your program, but I'm a pretty badass, I'm a badass. Like, don't mess with me. And it's not cocky, but that's a realization of who I am as an individual. And that's a power there, and that's a clarity there, and I've taken control of my life. So to go through this process of honesty with somebody, it's really going back and starting to look at your life, look at who you are, look at the things that have happened to you, and re-engineer, re-architect those moments. And everybody from the age of 0 to 8 was molded. 0 to 8, scientifically proven. 0 to 8 is when you are being molded. So start looking at some of the things that happened there. Maybe you moved. Maybe dad was in the military. Maybe mom got a divorce. Maybe dad lost his job. Something happened in there that you may want to go back and look at. And then there's other things too, but that's where we start. Then when we move from 8 to 16, then 16 to 24, and then, wherever you are from there. But anyway,
I'm trying.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. We're almost at an hour. And so I'm trying to think about how to wrap up. But at the same time, like, I feel really stuck on that story now. It feels like a really hard, like, I feel really torn because it didn't happen to me. And you're saying, I dealt with this and healed from it, but it feels like, I don't know, it feels like I almost don't believe it. Is that me hanging on to my stuff, or is that just empathy, or what's?
It's both. It's empathy. It's this concept that, you know, it's unimaginable to you. And I'm using a really low fruit story with you. I mean, I don't want to put your audience in a horrible mood. I went through a lot more difficult things than that, but it was, you know, there was, for a long time I hated doghouses, hated them. Now, you know, I'll build one. You know, so it doesn't. It isn't that. It's not really important that you believe it or not for me, but for you, it's the concept. It's the realization. You could tell me something that I'm like, I don't believe that. I mean, like a Spartan race. You know, we've talked about that a little bit. Guys have told me about things they've done on Spartan races and carried boulders for 24 hours through creeks, and I'm like, you can't. What are you talking about? That's not possible. I don't believe that. You know, so it's just because we don't have a reference point
Yeah,
to
no,
something.
I'm sorry. I meant more believing that you could be okay with it than
Oh,
that it
okay.
actually happened. I mean,
Well, you know, there's little things that happen in everybody's lives that,
yeah,
you know, we look at as ourselves and say, okay, well, this is my reality. And when you face your reality, it's the hardest reality to face, right? But other people will look at your reality and say, how did you do that? You know, I don't understand how you did that. Just think business. Let's wrap this into business. Is that how many people say, well, I don't know how, you know, stay with podcasting. I don't know how John Lee Dumas, you know, did that. I don't understand how to use a computer. I don't understand, you know, where's the button for the microphone? Like, what kind of microphone do you use? Do you hold it in your hand? Do you do this? They can't fathom it because they haven't experienced it. But then you create a course, Podcaster's Paradise, and you teach everybody how to do it, and everyone's like, oh, I get how to do that. That makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
So in personal trauma, it's very similar. You know, people say, well, I don't understand how you could be normal after that. I don't understand how you could be okay with that. I don't understand how you could do that. Well, until you've gone through something like that, or you've healed some moments in your own life, it is difficult.
yeah.
Excuse me. It is difficult to understand. Very difficult to understand. In my healing module, I get very clear. I mean, you said you've listened to the Superhuman Life podcast. What's the voiceover say in the very beginning? What I'm about to tell you may be hard to hear. It's your fault. Telling somebody that they were molested, raped, beaten, abandoned, abused, all these things, and it's their fault. That's some rough stuff. You know, that really rocks people the wrong way. But when you understand, and you know, this would take 29 minutes to bring clarity to. That's how long the video is. But when you understand why I make that point, and I do clarify it to some level, is that those things are controlling you, and they happened yesterday. And if I'm not mistaken, it's today. That does not mean ignore them, push them away, don't think about them. It means stop giving them the power to control you. And that happened to me when I was 16, and there's a whole long story about it. And if you go to superhuman.life, you can watch or hear the story of what happened when I was 16. But to your point, it doesn't matter if you can comprehend my existence and my reality. And I totally get it. And I'm not being insulting. I'm just saying what matters is that I understood it. And that for me, carrying around this doghouse on my back, literally and figuratively, carrying around this doghouse on my back and letting it weigh me down and letting it be this controller over me is ridiculous because it happened to me. I can't change that it happened. But then there's the clarity that because it happened means that I could endure it. I could overcome it, which means it's my fault that I was there in the first place because some part of my belief, you know, this is for me, this isn't for everybody, but my belief is that we aren't just on this planet to be, you know, mealworm food at some point. There's a greater existence. There's a greater purpose. So at some point along this journey, I made this decision that I could handle this. And my identity and who I am could get through these kinds of horrific experiences. And that becomes that's power in itself. Like I said, I mean, that's power in itself. Like I went through something when I was 6 years old that I had absolutely no quote unquote control over. I was, you know, an infant in somebody else's care, yet these things happened to me. And it's okay because I can live through it. I can make the next thing happen. So this is deep stuff. And, you know, this is why I created, 90 minutes plus of content, and I've also created 365 email. It's a 365 email chain thing, whatever you want to call it. It's a book, basically, in email form that people can sign up for every morning. It's completely free, and it walks through some of these principles every day. Like, here's a little this, here's a little that. This is a 3-day deal. Usually by the end of 3 days, when working with somebody, we can kind of walk you through all these different questions that you've brought up, and give you some techniques and some skills and some things. But this is a simple process once you spend some time understanding it. Yeah. And again, 17 straight years in counseling, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 17 years. And it wasn't until my own personal aha moment, clarity moment, this whole thing that we're talking about, that I literally walked in. I'll never forget. I walked into the counselor's office, sat down, and said, I don't need you anymore. And here's why. And I walked through what I had become, all these things. And the counselor was like, this is impossible, and they were mad because they're not going to get their $300 an hour anymore. But that's the reality, is that once you have this moment of clarity, once you have this moment of control, and now you're ready to stand in your power, it's all on you. And now you can go forward and make things happen. And, again, I practiced what I preach. 2012 was a crazy year. 2013 was difficult. 2014 was like kind of opening up a new thing. 2015, which is where I'm living 100% in this world, has been completely fulfilling. And, again, I went from a 6-figure income every month to a nonprofit, no income, and the happiness is so much stronger here than it was here. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to bring this over here. I like money. I don't want to be, poor the rest of my life. That's not what it's about. But it's an understanding. And now the money is a lot easier to get. So going all the way back to your part of your show, the entrepreneurialism side of it is that we stand in our own way of success. And we deem success as financial glory or recognition or likes on Facebook or whatever else. But success comes from when we truly 100% take honesty in ourselves, take healing upon ourselves, and stand in our own power. That's when we have success. Yeah. At that point, I've achieved success in my life. I can honestly say that. I am 100% successful. Everything else that comes in my life on a success meter, finances, whatever, those are just, that's just frosting on the cake. But success has been achieved. Now I'm not chasing success. And it's so much easier to live life because things then that's your manifest and, all that stuff. Things are now just coming to me. Things are now just happening. Just like you and I's interview, I didn't chase this. We saw it, sent an email out to you, and it just happened to work in my schedule, your schedule. Here we are. And those things are starting to happen over and over and over again. And those start building the blocks to creating a successful business.
And that really does wrap it up, I think, perfectly, because the thing that I'm really taking away from this whole hour is it really is about everything that happened to you made you who you are today. And your power is in fully embracing and being honest about and accepting all those parts, all the things that happened in your past, all the things that your business you, your personal you, your scared you, your courageous you, all those things make you who you are. And the more you can honestly embrace and accept and be true to that, then the more successful you're going to be in your life.
Exactly. And also understanding that they make you who you are just because that's art. That's how it works, right? You're being chiseled, you're being molded, you're being that, but you're still that piece of marble, right? There's still that core block of marble that created the statue of David. So you are that core piece of marble, and you have to realize what that means. And we're all a different stone. I guess we're going to stick on this analogy of art. We're all a different stone, but we've been molded to do different things. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't, that we're not that original piece of stone. So I would counsel everybody that, yes, all the things you've gone through have molded you and created what is there, but you have to tap into what's always been there, the core of who you are, and start letting that come through, with all these other things being lessons on how you can share and how you can experience and how you can help other people along the way, which is where your service thing comes in, all these different things. So, and service isn't, I don't even like the word service because its root means servant. You don't need to be a servant to the world. You need to be an asset to the world. And so, your business could be that. maybe you're creating again, go back to John. Look at what John has created for people, not just monetarily, but how many people now have the courage to get behind a microphone and start saying things that they believe in, which creates a voice, which creates a movement. And even if they only have 100 downloads every month, right? Or 185 or whatever, 187, I think is the average. Even if you're just average, even if you're just barely squeaking by, you've done something you didn't think you could do. You're doing things that are powerful. You're creating all these different elements of life. And that's because of a guy like John who went out and did something. So what are you not doing that it could encourage thousands of people to do because of who you are and your core and the lessons you've learned? So, that to me is the ultimate reason that we're on the planet, is to help other people move through this life in a way that they feel joy and happiness and success and blah, blah, blah.
I love it. I love it, Wes. I'm so glad we got together today. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Two talkers together and we can go I feel like I could talk to you all day.
We probably could.
So we want to send people to superhuman.life, the website, superhuman.life. Check out Wes's podcasts, Superhuman Life and A Human Project. Are we good? Anything you got to get off your chest?
No, we're good. I just
set?
hope people I hope people follow through with this. And it's crazy. I don't know if we can, in an hour and 7 minutes, people can go through this. So I would encourage, if you're confused, if you're lost, if you got a little glimpse of like, ooh, I kind of see this, just go through superhuman.life. It'll clear everything up for you and give you some perspective to look at your life with.
Awesome. You can hang around for just a second, Wes?
Yes.
All right. So just to sign off, I think we said pretty much everything that needed to be said during the interview. So we'll leave it at that until you and I speak again. Be the person you want to be, build the business you want to build, and have the successful life you want to have.
Thanks, Mike. Have a great day.